Back to Chief Women Wise Talk Show. I hope you have enjoyed our previous episodes. We've talked about marriage, human trafficking, self-care, women's health. Make sure you check those out. Today, we're going to talk about purpose. Having purpose. How do you discover your purpose? We know that happiness and social connection can have positive benefits on our health. But also research suggests that the direction in having purpose for your life matters just as much. A psychologist, and he's a professor at a college in Canada, did this study, and he talked to people over a 15-year period. A lot of them felt at that point that they were just living aimlessly, running through life with no purpose. But after that 15 years, that 14th year, he got back in contact with them. And when he contacted them, he asked, how do you feel now? And a lot of them who felt like they discovered purpose felt like they were living happy lives, that they were successful. And I want to just say that having purpose does give you value, direction, and focus. And so I want to ask you, how has having purpose impacted your life? And then also I want to talk about, how did you discover your purpose? Because a lot of young people, when I'm, out engaging, they always want to know, how do I discover my purpose? So today I want to talk about that. Yes. So how has purpose impacted your life?
I could say for me, just recently and just life, purpose has helped me to not give up when I wanted to. And it's so many days, even recently, I just wanted to give up. But I had to remember my purpose. And I had to remember that if I give up, it's too many people I'm connected to, too many lives. So I could just say that for me, purpose, and it helped me to keep going on. It helped me to keep going on, even when I felt like this ain't working. I know that I was created with a purpose. So even if it feels like, nothing's going right, I have purpose.
And that's perseverance. It's always important for us to persevere through that hard time. And sometimes having something to focus on, or like you saying, knowing that it's others that are counting on you, makes you want to continue to push through. Right. What about you, Naomi?
Well, when I hear purpose, I really think about what is God's will, and have I really sought His purpose for my life? And maybe it's the season that I'm in at the time that God has me in, that is my purpose. Or, but there's one thing, one assignment or purpose that we've all been put on this earth for. And I'm not going to ever forget that. And that's always going to be in the top of my mind. Like, how can I serve people the way God wants us to serve people?
What about you, Pastor Shennette?
Oh, goodness, I could talk about this all day.
Right. Yeah.
Some people, their whole aim in life, their whole purpose is to retire. So they work, they save money, they do everything they can for that one thing. But then how many of those, once they retire, are actually happy?
Right.
How many of them are really content? And they find out that it's not all it's cracked up to be. That I think we are created as human beings to want to achieve and to make a difference. And if we're not doing that and achieving at something or accomplishing something, I think eventually we will be miserable. I think we have to have that focus that we're doing something for the betterment of this earth, or for people, or for, as you said, serving God and fulfilling His purpose. If we're not doing that, I think we're missing why we were created.
Yeah. And that's so true, because God has unlimited destiny for all of us. And Jonathan Shuttlesworth, he's an evangelist, he says before God can give us something, we have to see ourselves doing it. We have to be able to visualize possessing that thing. And I think a lot of times, if we lack purpose, we don't feel our self-worth, so we can't see ourselves owning that home or taking that trip or, going to do something to another country, going to experience something in another country. Mm-hmm. So I think for us to really discover our purpose, it takes, us moving outside of that box, expanding our vision, being able to try new things. I'm a little girl from South Florida. One thing I never wanted to do is go live somewhere where it was snow. But a lot of times now when I'm planning vacations, I want to go to the mountains. I want to go experience snow. So how has, your life allowed you to discover your purpose? Or what were some things that helped you discover your purpose in God?
Well, for me, it's one little step at a time. Mm-hmm. You see a need, mm-hmm. and you say, I can meet that need, and you go do it. Yep. And then that builds for the next one. I think a lot of times we make this too hard and too big, mm-hmm. and we look for, okay, what is the big thing that I need to do, and how do I accomplish it? And then we have this fear of failure because it's so big. We think there's no way. How in the world could I ever accomplish that? Mm-hmm. So we set ourselves up for failure.
Yep.
But if we'll just do that one thing, and that could be, you see somebody on the side of the streets begging and you hand them a water bottle. Yep. It can be that simple. That one thing will activate something in you. And then you'll say, hey, well, if I could do that, then I can do a feeding program. If I can do that, then I can, and you begin to dream, but it's a realistic dream.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one step, do one thing.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really good.
I think you can start with a seed. And for example, I left college when I was like 20 years old, and I didn't go back till I was 30. Mm-hmm. And what really drove me to go back to school and get my bachelor's degree was watching a movie called God Grew Tired of Us, all about the lost boys of Sudan. And it, that little seed of watching that one movie changed the course of my life, and I decided to go back to school and pursue a bachelor's degree in international policy. I had this drive to, work for the UN before I knew what the UN really has its purpose for, and so just those little things that can really change that course. I went to a breastfeeding support group one time, and then the very next week I was there again, and every single week for a year. And that little seed that was planted really had me think about being a doula one day, or being a breastfeeding counselor. I never got that out of my mind. For 10 years I kept thinking, I really would love to help women breastfeed. And then when I got into doula work, I actually got more passionate about the doula work than I did the breastfeeding. Mm-hmm. So, it's just that one seed that can be planted that can really change your life.
Yeah, so true. That's good. So true. That's good. I know for me, as I was thinking, a lot of times in my life, I just had to do it scared.
Yeah.
And then that's how I kind of walked to my purpose, because it was just try something. Mm-hmm. Let's just try something.
Step out of faith.
Yeah, just step out of faith. And that's, of course, as I continue to grow and mature in my faith, I discovered my purpose. But there was just so many times I never desired to be a preacher. That was not my desire. But I stepped out on faith to do it. And I've been doing it ever since. And I had to do it scared. I never... the women's ministry or church ministry, or even I had got into modeling and acting one time, and that came out of I was being nosy. I was just snooping around, and I got hooked up into that and did that. And so a lot of things like purpose-wise, or even becoming a mother, growing into a mother, growing into a wife. A lot of things, I look back on my life, I feel like these things chose me. I didn't necessarily choose it. They just kind of chose me, but I don't know. I think in the choosing, there has to be, like you said, a seed, a spark. Mm-hmm. And then when that spark, when you go off that spark or that igniting, you just go with it. And it's just like, purpose.
And I love what all you guys are saying, with the spark and with those seeds, even you can look back over your life, I'm sure, and see where God has been planting seeds all along your journey.
Yeah.
And then you take those little steps in faith, to step out, or you meet a need, and then that need becomes your passion.
Yeah.
And then God gets to launch it into something that you never knew you had the possibility to do.
Right.
And we know we can't do it without Him.
Right.
And I think that's so vital, if you're trying to discover your purpose, try new things, be willing to have faith, but also take those small steps to grow in areas.
Yeah.
I found that like the more you invest in your weaknesses too, you grow in a different direction. You might think, I'm really good because I was always a basketball player at playing basketball. But God used that vehicle to do so much greater in my life. I got to see the world, meet people I would have never met just with basketball.
Right.
And so when we start looking at opportunities God provides for us, I think we'll then start discovering our purpose more. And when I was younger, my mom used to always tell us, optimize outstanding opportunities. So optimize outstanding opportunities for me led to more purpose.
Right.
Because if you did well in those things, if you excel, but also if you fail, you always learn. And I think being a learner, being someone who constantly wants to soak up knowledge, not only from books, but from others, allows you to grow more in that direction.
Yeah.
And so lastly, as we're wrapping up, I just want to encourage you as you listen in that you are alive for a reason. We're not meant to walk the world aimlessly. And the reason why I want to say this is because a lot of people feel like they're depressed and have anxiety because they lack purpose. But like we've been saying, in every stage of your life, no matter how young, how old, there's still something that you can do that it will make you excited to get out of bed about, that just brings joy to your heart. So we want to encourage you and challenge you to find those things, try new things, try to go new places, try new foods, try to meet new people. And I think all of those things will allow you to have greater purpose. And then, of course, seek God, because in that self-discovery, who best is it to know than the one that created you? And if He created you to do certain things, the more you're in tune with Him and you're plugged into Him, the more you can bring those things to earth. So I hope you're just encouraged, to go on that journey of discovery. Let go of that fear. Link up with sisters and people who can, challenge you and take you new places. And you'll begin to see more joy and happiness in your life. And it would in turn benefit those around you.
So, all right. Rolling.
I don't know what time that was, but
No, you were good.
okay.